I'm the Audit for Kit Guru. Today I'm going to build a gaming PC. A gaming PC with a budget of £1,500, so it had better be good. When I'm finished, I'll run some benchmarks and you can let me know in the comments. Was I successful or was it a dismal fail? The parts I'm using. AMD Ryzen 5 3600X, not for resale, I don't think they trust me. That currently sells for about £195. The motherboard, I've gone cheap. I've gone for an MSI B450 Gaming Plus Max, obviously previous gen chipset, £95. If I was to go for X570, you'd be spending £200, possibly more. The memory, we've got some G-Skill Trident Z RGB, that's rated at DDR4 3200, 16GB dual channel, £99. A large part of the budget is going on this Gigabyte RTX 2080 Super, that's a Windforce model, £670. However, as RTX 2080 Supers go, bloomin' cheap. The case is one I'm not familiar with. It's by Colink, it's the Phalanx model. I must confess I chose it based on the fact it has some mesh at the front, it's got 4 RGB fans, it's £80. It looks on paper like it should do a good job. I'm hoping to not have to add any extra fans to increase the spend. I'm not against the glass and the RGB, but that's not the primary focus. However, I do think if you're spending £1,500, you should get something that looks at least a little interesting. I have high hopes of the Colink Phalanx. Then we have the power supply. This is Seasonic Focus GX650, so 650 watts rated, gold rated, listed at £104, but you can find it on sale for about £10 cheaper. Seasonic gives a monumental 10-year warranty on their power supplies. Some models actually are longer than 10 years, but this particular one, 10 years. So if you're spending that sort of money on this power supply today, you can easily transfer that power supply to a future PC build. You'll be using it 4 years to come. SSD comes from Western Digital, that's the SN550 blue model, 1TB for £105. The hard drive, this is a little bit of a fudge. It's a 1TB model selling for £36. I actually asked if I could have the 2TB, which is £50. The fact is no one reviews 1 and 2TB mechanical hard drives. It was something of a miracle Western Digital even had a 1TB they could send me. So I'm saying 1TB bulk storage. Common sense says you buy a bigger drive than that for very little extra money to give you loads of storage in your new PC. Anyway, that's my thinking with the build, and now it's time to get on and plug it all together. Identify the corner with the square pattern rather than the angle. It goes there. Processor in socket. Lever down. We're going to use the box cooler that comes with the Ryzen 5 3600X. It has a screw at either corner. We don't require these stock plastic clips. We're going to want to connect the fan over here. I can either put the cooler that way round, go across behind, that works, or like that with this bulge in the cooler with the AMD logo towards the memory, which just overshadows the first slot. Let us put it that way round. We tighten the cooler down crisscross so it goes down nice and even. Connect the cooler fan. We're going to need a stand. Yeah, we need to move the standoff for the M.2. And we need a securing screw, which will be, well, looky there, M.2 screw. You're using a number 2 screwdriver throughout, which is not going to fit that screw. That is a number 1 Phillips, which does the job nicely. Memory going in dual channel, so we use the red slots. Next step is the case. Look in the drive bay for a box or bag of accessories. There we go. RGB control, standoff screws, all the usual good stuff. Looks like we have all the access we need, so we haven't got to worry about the front panel. The Colink Phalanx has a power supply shroud that is vented and riveted in place, so we are going to insert the power supply there. It has an air filter underneath. We could install the power supply with a fan either up or down. I think I'm going to go for down. The focus gold is fully modular, so I've installed the cables I require for this build, which is pretty much the bare minimum. So we've got the 24-pin power, 1 EPS connector, 1 graphics card, and we only need the single SATA because there's 1 SATA hard drive. I do therefore have plenty of scope for expanding at a later date. Power supply in. Next up, the motherboard. A couple of minor snags are presenting themselves already. The first is that the RGB controller for the Phalanx case is ARGB, addressable RGB, so 2 pins blank, 1 pin, that's 5 volt. The MSI B450 Gaming Plus Max uses the older 12 volt non-addressable RGB, 1 header there and 1 header up there, so it's 4 pins in a row and the 12 volt is marked. The 2 systems are incompatible, so I'm going to be using the RGB controller to manually control the lighting rather than using it connected to the motherboard. Second thing is the RGB is controlled by that 4-pin Molex power there, so I need to add Molex power to the power supply, as I didn't do that initially. So I take that extra cable and I plug it into the power supply. Not too difficult at this stage in the game, but will get more complicated later. The rear fan has the cables coming off from this point here at the bottom, and then they trail around, go out there, go to the RGB controller. Can't see any reason to have that mess, so let's rotate the fan and do something about that. Makes more sense to me. Installing the motherboard, we have an I/O shield which sits like so. Therefore the I/O shield pops in here. Then we have a series of standoffs for the motherboard to sit on. We've got 6 installed at the moment. Looks like a micro ATX setup. This board is ATX and has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Very conventional. MSI has marked the back of the board in these locations here to make absolutely sure that you don't have an unused standoff in that position, because you'll cause terrible damage. So we need to add 3 standoffs, which come from the bag of accessories with the co-link case. So these are going to go here, here, and here. If you don't get a standoff driver with your motherboard accessories, you're going to need a 5mm socket. If you're an animal, you might use a pair of pliers, but that's a nasty thing to do. Might as well check the others are tight at the same time. Oh. That one was loose. Motherboard into case, keep the cables out of the way from the rear fan. Slip it in, check it aligns with the I/O. Eyeball it from above to make sure the standoffs line up with the holes. Yep, all good. All good. Time for some cables. EPS connector for the processor at the top of the motherboard. Main power, 24 pin. Graphics power is also going to go through there. We'll leave the SATA down the bottom for the drive, and the cables for the bottom of the motherboard. Come through here. Graphics card. Screws go in the outside of the frame. And the power. And the hard drive goes in. Let's pick the bottom caddy. Those little pegs engage with the screw holes. And the caddy goes back in place. SATA cable for data, power connection, job done. Connect your monitor, mouse and keyboard, turn on the power. Haha! And mash the Del key so we can go into the BIOS once we have the blue light on the monitor. There we go, signal coming now. F1 to run setup. And there we are in the BIOS. And now we want to update the BIOS. F7 for advanced. M flash. Okay, we've got a BIOS on this flash drive and we select that BIOS file. God, that mouse is laggy. And there we go. Yep. Okay, all good. And there we go, and the BIOS is updated to version H50. For the next stage, you need to buy yourself a copy of Windows 10, assuming you're using Windows 10, which can cost as little as £5 on eBay or a monumental £220 from Microsoft themselves. Once you have your Windows 10 key, you then create a bootable installer, insert the bootable flash drive in a USB port, and turn your PC on again. And here we go, Windows installation. Type in your Windows key. We've got two drives. I'm going to take it that drive 0 is the SSD, drive 1 is mechanical. Remove the USB drive. We don't want the PC to boot off that flash drive again. And here we go into Windows 10. And now we spend a few minutes answering fairly obvious questions. Hurrah! I mean, it looks horrible, but it's there. Once you've got an internet connection, you can expect your PC to get busy in the background. And here I've got a flash drive of drivers downloaded from the MSI website for this motherboard. So that's AMD chipset, Realtek networking, audio, plus also G-Skill Trident drivers for the RGB on the memory, and graphics drivers for the RTX 2080 Super graphics card. Windows Update has found a lot of updates, just as you'd expect. Before we do that, we'll rattle through the drivers and then we'll return to Windows Update and get Windows looking all spanking fresh. Windows fully up to date, drivers installed, let's do Cinebench. Clock speeds over 4 GHz, 4075. Obviously it's a short test, Cinebench R15, dropping to 4050 and 4075, so it's maintaining 4.05. 76 degrees on the stock cooler, 1590 score. Run that again. Well, the temperature's still around 70, 72, 75, 78, 78, 78. Okay, we seem to be going consistently at 78. Obviously it's a CPU workload, no graphics. $79, that was getting towards. Okay, decent score. Time Spy. CPU Rocksteady 4000, and if we go to GPU-Z, GPU clock there, 1935, 1965, so all looking absolutely lovely. $1440p result in Far Cry 5, looking good. Let's try it at 1080 just to see what happens. Storming performance, but why not go for 1440 when 1080 is so over the top? And let's look at Shadow of the Tomb Raider at 1440 Ultra preset. Look at that, excellent performance. Gonna run Time Spy stress test to see what the CPU and GPU thermals look like when the test loops 20 times. The CPU is running at 62 degrees Celsius throughout that stress test, and the GPU at 70 degrees. That's it, we're done, and it's been a fair success. Two things I would change if I was to do this job over again. I would prefer to have a RGB function on the motherboard, so I could control digital RGB rather than regular old school RGB. And the fixed speed fans in the front of the phalanx, not so good. Definitely want PWM. However, and this is the happy news, the performance of this PC exactly matches what I'd expect for the components we've used. So if you head over to kitguru.net and read Luke's reviews of various AMD Ryzen processors, including the Ryzen 5 3600X, you will get extensive tables of performance figures. The same is true for the RTX 2080 Super, in this instance a gigabyte. However, Dominic has tested a number of these graphics cards and similar models and products further down the stack, and you can see exactly what you get for your money. In this instance, 100 frames per second for 1440p gaming, no trouble whatsoever. CPU intensive tasks, we've got 6 cores, 12 threads running at just over 4 GHz on all cores, 405 GHz in Cinebench, no trouble whatsoever, and that's out of the box without any overclocking whatsoever. There is definitely more performance waiting to be unlocked if you spend just a little bit of time on the job. In terms of reliability, I'm completely confident this PC will live for years. The Seasonic power supply has got an extensive warranty and this PC runs nice and cool. CPU around 70 degrees, graphics around 60 degrees. This case flows air quite nicely. So a success. In terms of money, depending on how you price Windows 10, if you go to the lower end of the scale, this PC cost around £1,400. If you go for that crazy crackers £220 price from Microsoft, yeah, around £1,600. So if you go for the full price copy of Windows, then yes, in that sense, fail. But you won't, will you? Don't do that to us. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up, hit the bell button, subscribe, head to the merch store, buy a t-shirt, head over to kitguru.net to read more reviews, news, and look at our photos and such like. I'm Lee Wood for Kit Guru. This is a success of a gaming PC for £1,500.